You will never recover from addiction unless you do these 5 things. And number 5 is essential. The first one is this, and I say this in love, but we need to accept responsibility. This has got to do with the idea of locus of control. Do I really believe that things that happen to me are all because of outside forces? Or do I have any control of what goes on in my life? And the truth is, we do have control. And at the end of the day, I am responsible for the choices I've made. Now, of course, they're influenced by outside things. But in active addiction, what we tend to do, we tend to blame, excuse, deny, or minimize. We'll blame others. The reason that I do this is because you do that. The reason I got so upset was because you did this. See, rather than accepting responsibility for my choices, I make my choices your fault. And again, we can be influenced by other people, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible for my choices. The same is with the excuses. You know that my pain has been high. I'm excusing the pain on my use. You know that work has been frantic. I'm explaining my substance abuse on what's going on at work. Or you know that my marriage is in a crisis, and so I excuse my behavior by putting it on the marriage. We need to be careful not to blame or excuse or outright deny. Sometimes we'll say, well, yeah, I did this, but I'm not doing this, when in actuality, we know that we're definitely doing this. And another thing we'll do is just minimize. And if you're in active addiction, we need to take responsibility. If you want to recover, we need to say, this really is the extent of what I'm doing. And that takes humility, but we'll get there in a minute. Number 2 is this. You are never going to recover unless you accept failure. How many of you are the perfect mom? Raise your hand if you're the perfect dad. How many of you go through work and you never make any mistake at work? The answer is nobody. We don't do life perfectly. How many of you are spiritual people? How many of you do your spirituality perfectly? The point in saying all that is this: we sometimes fail. We sometimes mess up. We don't do it right. And we can't expect recovery to do any different. Sometimes it's going to be 2 steps up and 1 step back. And we have to be okay with that. The problem is sometimes we start recovery and we realize it's harder than we thought, and we don't accept the failure, and so we go back. You will never recover unless you accept the fact that you're going to recover imperfectly, and that's okay. Number 3, you are never going to recover unless you're humble. Humility is absolutely vital for us to really get into genuine recovery. It takes humility to say, you know what, I've got a problem. It takes humility to say, you know what, I need help. It takes humility to ask for help. And we have to be teachable. If we're not teachable, if we can't admit that there are some things in my life that I haven't been doing right, there are better problem-solving skills than me turning to my addiction and compulsive behaviors, we will never recover. We can't recover without humility. Number 4, you will never recover unless you're willing to invest in your recovery. The truth is, it's not your spouse's recovery. It's not your parents' recovery. It's not your children's recovery. It's not your therapist or your counselor's recovery. It's your recovery, and you have to do the work. You will never recover unless you're willing to invest in your own recovery. And that means if you need to go to therapy, you go to therapy. If you need to go into inpatient care for a while, you need to go into inpatient care. You need to invest in it. You need to do the work. And if there's homework, you need to do the homework. And if there's books to read, you need to read the books. That is one thing that will inhibit our recovery if we are not willing to invest in it. And number five, you have to want it. You have to want to recover. And this is where a lot of people get hung up. They're really in recovery programs, and I've seen this many times over the years. People will come in, but they're there because their wife wants them there. Their husband wants them there. They're there because their parents want them there, or the courts want them there, but they don't want to be there. Years ago, I wrote an article, and I believe it's true today. The article was titled, Recovery Doesn't Work, and it's true. Recovery doesn't work. In the same way a hammer doesn't work. A hammer's a great tool, and many men have built many buildings using a hammer, but a hammer has never built a building. And recovery doesn't work. It has to be something that you want. And so the question today is this: do you want it? Are you willing to accept responsibility? Take ownership of your actions? Accept failure when it comes and realize it's a learning process and you'll grow and it'll get easier and better? Are you willing to be humble? Admit that you have a problem, ask for help, accept help when it's given, accept that your way might not be working, and finally, are you willing to invest in your own recovery? Guys, I close my videos every time by saying this. I say, I'm Brian on YouTube at New Life Recovery. As always, I love you, God bless you, and until next time, be well. And that's true, and I hope that you hear that today. Guys, these things are said out of love, but if we want to recover, we've got to do these things. God bless you. Until next time, be well.